They said Isaac Thornwood had a heart carved from mountain granite and a soul as cold as the alpine winds that howled through the Bitterroot Range. He was a man who once killed a grizzly bear with nothing but a hunting knife in his bare hands, and rumor had it he was sitting on a gold claim so rich it could buy Montana twice over. Every wealthy widow and desperate beauty in Silver Ridge lined up to catch his eye, painting their lips red and tightening their corsets until they could barely breathe. They thought perfection was the path to a mountain man's fortune. They were wrong. They didn't know that Isaac Thornwood wasn't looking for a face that launched 1,000 dreams. He was searching for the one soul brave enough to survive 1,000 nightmares. This is the true story of how the most feared man in the territory ignored the pristine beauties and chose the woman whose scars told a story more beautiful than any unblemished face ever could. Silver Ridge, Montana Territory. October 1882. The door to Miller's Dry Goods didn't just open that morning. It exploded inward with a force that sent the bell clattering against its bracket like a death knell. The warm interior, usually smelling of cinnamon, dried apples, and clean cotton, was instantly flooded with the scent of pine resin, animal hide, and the sharp metallic tang of mountain cold. Conversations died mid-sentence. The cluster of women gathered near the ribbon display froze like deer sensing a wolf. Mrs. Victoria Ashford, the town's reigning beauty and wealthiest widow, stopped mid-gesture, her fan suspended in the air like a weapon she'd forgotten how to wield. Isaac Thornwood filled the doorway. At 6 feet 4 inches in his worn leather boots, he had to duck his head to enter, and when he straightened, his shadow stretched across the entire shop floor. He wore a coat stitched together from wolf pelts, the kind that made his already massive shoulders look like they could bear the weight of the mountain itself. His hair was long, black, and tied back with a strip of rawhide. His beard was a tangled thicket that concealed most of his face, but what you could see, those eyes, pale gray like winter ice, missed nothing. He stomped the mud from his boots, sending clots of half-frozen earth skittering across the polished floorboards that Mr. Miller swept twice daily. "Mr. Thornwood," Victoria purred, stepping forward with the practiced grace of a woman who'd spent years perfecting the art of calculated charm. She wore a dress of emerald silk that must have cost more than most families earned in a year, and her auburn hair was piled high in an elaborate arrangement that defied both gravity and good sense. "What a pleasant surprise. We don't often see you down from your mountain before the first snow." Isaac didn't look at her face. His eyes scanned the room with the intensity of a predator assessing terrain. He grunted, a sound that originated somewhere deep in his chest, more rumble than word. "Supplies," was all he said. His voice was like stones grinding together in a riverbed, rough, low, inevitable. Victoria wasn't deterred. She glanced at her companions, 2 other widows who'd positioned themselves like chess pieces across the store. There was Eleanor Brennan, blonde and delicate, whose late husband had owned the lumber mill. And Sarah Pritchard, dark-haired and severe, whose banker husband had left her comfortable but desperately lonely. Together, they formed Silver Ridge's aristocracy, and they'd made something of a sport out of speculating which of them would eventually tame the mountain beast and claim his rumored fortune. "Mr. Miller has stepped out for lunch," Victoria said, moving closer. Close enough that her perfume, expensive, imported, overwhelming, cut through the mountain air that clung to Isaac like a second skin. "But surely a man of your stature needs more than just beans and flour. Winter is long up there. And lonely." Isaac turned his head slowly, fixing her with those pale gray eyes. For a moment, Victoria felt what it must be like to be prey. Then he looked past her, over her shoulder, toward the back corner of the shop where the shadows were deepest. There, behind a small table piled with fabric scraps and spools of thread, sat a figure most people in Silver Ridge preferred to pretend didn't exist. Rebecca Hartwell was 26 years old, though the left side of her face made her look ancient. The burned scars started at her temple, crawled down her cheek like the branches of a lightning-struck tree, and disappeared beneath the high collar of her plain brown dress. The skin was puckered, discolored, pink and white and angry red in places where the damage had been deepest. Her left eye had survived, but the eyelid drooped slightly, giving her a permanent expression of melancholy. The right side of her face was untouched, and if you looked only at that side, you'd see what she might have been, pretty, perhaps even beautiful, with soft hazel eyes and a gentle curve to her lips. She kept her head down, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency as she mended a torn shirt. She didn't look up when Isaac entered. She never looked up when anyone entered. Looking up invited stares, and stares invited pity or disgust, and Rebecca had long ago decided she could live without both. "Rebecca," Isaac said. Just that. Just her name. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet Victoria had donated to the store to make shopping more civilized. Rebecca's hand stilled on the fabric. Slowly, as if moving through cold honey, she raised her head. Her good eye widened slightly when she saw him looking directly at her. Not past her. Not through her. At her. "Mr. Thornwood," she said softly. Her voice was like autumn leaves rustling, gentle, easily overlooked, but persistent. "The coat you made me last winter," Isaac said, his gravelly voice somehow gentler. "Still wearing it. Best piece of gear I own." Rebecca's scarred cheek twitched. It might have been the beginning of a smile, or just the damaged muscle contracting. "I'm glad it serves you well, sir. Need another one. Heavier this year. More pockets. Can you do it?" Rebecca glanced at the women watching her, their faces ranging from shock to poorly concealed disgust. "I can try, Mr. Thornwood." "Don't try," Isaac said, and there was something almost like warmth in his voice. "You'll do it. You're the best seamstress in 3 territories. When can it be ready?" Rebecca stared at him. No one had ever called her the best at anything. Not since the fire. 2 weeks, she whispered. "If I work every evening." "Price?" $20, she said quickly. Too quickly. It was probably too much. She prepared to lower it. 40, Isaac countered. "I'll pay 40. And I'll pick it up myself." Before she could protest, he turned and walked out of the shop with the same explosive energy he'd entered with, leaving the door swinging on its hinges and a stunned silence in his wake. The moment he was gone, Victoria turned on Rebecca like a viper striking. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "It seems the beast has found a kindred spirit. How fitting." Eleanor tittered behind her fan. "I suppose even monsters need someone to sew their clothes. Though I can't imagine touching that filthy fur without gloves." "Or looking at him without fainting," Sarah added, though her eyes betrayed a different kind of interest. "Though I suppose our dear Rebecca is used to frightening appearances, aren't you?" Rebecca's fingers clenched the fabric she'd been mending. She said nothing. She'd learned years ago that responding only made it worse. "Tell me, Rebecca," Victoria continued, circling the small table like a cat with a wounded mouse. "Does he know about the fire? About how you got those marks?" "I'm sure he doesn't care about ancient history," Eleanor said, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Men like that only care about function. And really, what else could someone like Rebecca offer?" "At least she's useful," Sarah said with mock charity. "Not like poor Martha Simmons, who can't even manage to." "Ladies," Mr. Miller's voice cut through the cruelty like a knife. He'd returned from lunch, his round face flushed with barely contained anger. "I believe you have shopping to complete, or perhaps you prefer to discuss character somewhere that doesn't drive away my paying customers." Victoria smiled, but there was ice in it. "Of course, Mr. Miller. We were just leaving. Come, girls. The air in here has become stifling." They swept out in a rustle of expensive fabric and expensive perfume, leaving Rebecca alone with Mr. Miller and the echo of their laughter. "Don't mind them," Miller said gently. He was a good man, one of the few who still treated Rebecca like a human being. "They're just jealous." "Jealous?" Rebecca touched her scarred cheek. "Of what?" "Of the fact that Isaac Thornwood looked right past their painted faces and saw you." Rebecca shook her head. "He just needs a coat, Mr. Miller. Nothing more." "Maybe," Miller said, but his eyes said he thought differently. "Maybe not." That night, Rebecca worked by candlelight in a small room she rented behind the bakery. It wasn't much, just a bed, a table, a chair, and her sewing supplies, but it was hers, paid for with the money she earned from mending and altering, from making the things no one else wanted to make because the work was too tedious or the client too poor. She spread the wolf pelts Isaac had left with Mr. Miller across her table. They were beautiful, thick and soft, perfectly tanned. She ran her fingers through the fur and began to plan the coat in her mind. Not just any coat. Not just functional. She would make him something worthy of the man who'd called her the best seamstress in 3 territories. As she worked, she thought about the fire. She always thought about the fire when she worked at night, when the candle flame danced and sent shadows across the walls. 5 years earlier. June 1877. She'd been 21, fresh from finishing school back east, newly arrived to teach at the Silver Ridge schoolhouse. Pretty. Whole. Unmarried but promising. Her future had stretched before her like a golden road. The orphanage fire had started in the middle of the night. No one knew how, a knocked-over lamp, a spark from the hearth, an act of God or devil. What mattered was that the old wooden building had gone up like kindling, and inside were 14 children, ages 3 to 12, sleeping in their beds. Rebecca had been walking home from a late supper at the boarding house. She'd heard the screams. She didn't remember making the decision to run toward the fire. She just remembered the heat, the smoke, the way her lungs had burned with each breath. She'd gone in 3 times. The first time, she'd gotten 2 children out. The second time, 3 more. The third time, as she'd carried out the last child, a little girl named Emma, only 4 years old, part of the roof had collapsed. The burning timber had caught her left side, her face, her shoulder, her arm. She'd held on to Emma, shielded her with her own body, and somehow made it outside before she collapsed. All 14 children had survived. Every single one. Rebecca had spent 6 months recovering. When she finally looked in a mirror, she understood that the woman who'd run into that fire was gone. In her place was this new creature, half beautiful and half monster, someone parents whispered about and children stared at with open mouths. The teaching position had been quietly withdrawn. "We just think it might be disturbing for the younger students," the school board chairman had said, unable to meet her eyes. So she'd learned to sew. It was something she could do in the back of the shop, where no one had to look at her. Something useful. Something that justified her existence in a world that wanted to forget she existed. But Isaac Thornwood had looked at her. Really looked at her. And he hadn't looked away. Rebecca worked through the night, her fingers flying, cutting and stitching with a precision born of years of practice. She made the coat larger through the shoulders, reinforced the seams with double stitching, added deep inner pockets for supplies. She lined it with rabbit fur for extra warmth, and sewed hidden loops for carrying rope or tools. And on the inside, over the heart, where no one but Isaac would ever see, she embroidered a small design, a pine tree standing alone against a mountain, its branches reaching toward a single star. 2 weeks later, to the day, Isaac Thornwood returned to Miller's Dry Goods. This time, the shop was crowded. It was Saturday, market day, and half the town had crammed inside to escape a sudden cold rain that had swept down from the mountains. Victoria Ashford was there, of course, along with her usual entourage. But there were also farmers, miners, families with children, all pressed together in the warm, dry space. When Isaac walked in, the crowd parted like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. "Mr. Thornwood," Mr. Miller said with genuine warmth. "Right on time. Rebecca has your coat ready." Rebecca emerged from the back, carrying the coat folded over her arms. She'd wrapped it in brown paper, tied with twine, but Isaac immediately tore the paper away. The coat was magnificent. Even Victoria, who'd been preparing to make some cutting remark, fell silent when she saw it. The wolf fur had been worked into a pattern that suggested movement, pack hunting, mountain running. The stitching was so fine it was nearly invisible, and the whole thing radiated craftsmanship and care. Isaac held it up, examining every seam, every pocket, every detail. Then he slipped it on. It fit perfectly. Like it had been grown on him rather than sewn. "Rebecca," he said, and his voice was different. Softer. Almost wondering. "This is..." He trailed off, seemingly unable to find the words. "It's just a coat," Rebecca said quickly, her scarred cheek twitching with nervous energy. "I hope it serves you well, Mr. Thornwood." Isaac reached into his coat pocket, his old coat, and pulled out a leather pouch. He set it on the counter with a heavy thunk. 40, as promised. And another 40 for the artistry. "Sir, that's too much," Rebecca protested. "No," Isaac said, meeting her eyes. "It's not enough." Then he did something that made the entire shop collectively hold its breath. He took Rebecca's hand. Her scarred, calloused, seamstress hand. He held it gently, like it was something precious, and he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You have a gift, Miss Hartwell. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Victoria's face went white, then red, then settled into an expression of pure venom. "How touching," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "The mountain man and the monster girl. Quite the pair." Isaac turned slowly, his hand still holding Rebecca's. "What did you say?" Victoria lifted her chin, emboldened by her audience. "I said it's touching. Two broken things finding each other. Though I suppose you don't have many other options, do you, Rebecca? No respectable man would." "Careful," Isaac said, and though he didn't raise his voice, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Very careful how you finish that sentence." "Oh, please," Eleanor jumped in, standing beside Victoria in solidarity. "Everyone knows what she is. A scarred spinster who saved 14 children from burning to death," Isaac interrupted, his voice like rolling thunder. "That's what she is. While you three were sleeping safe in your beds, Rebecca Hartwell ran into hellfire 3 times and carried out every child in that orphanage. Every single one. The shop had gone deathly quiet. She burned so they wouldn't. She scarred so they could heal. She gave up her beauty, her teaching position, her entire future so 14 children could have one. And you." He looked at Victoria, at Eleanor, at Sarah with an expression of such contempt that all 3 women stepped back. "You mock her. You, who've never sacrificed anything more meaningful than an unflattering hat." He turned back to Rebecca, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Miss Hartwell," he said formally, "would you do me the honor of joining me for supper at the Grand Hotel tonight? I'd like to discuss a business proposition." Rebecca stared at him. The Grand Hotel was the finest establishment in Silver Ridge. It was where senators dined when they passed through, where cattle barons celebrated their deals. It was not a place for scared seamstresses who lived in rooms behind bakeries. She touched her scarred cheek reflexively. People will stare. Let them, Isaac said simply. I'll be too busy looking at you to notice. Then he did something that would be talked about in Silver Ridge for the next 50 years. He leaned down, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. And he kissed her scarred cheek. Not quickly. Not with pity. With deliberate, unmistakable tenderness. When he pulled back, Rebecca was crying openly, and half the women in the shop were in tears as well, though whether from emotion or shock was hard to say. 7 o'clock, Isaac said. I'll collect you from Mrs. Brennan's bakery. He walked out of the shop, and this time, no one said a word. Rebecca stood frozen, her hand pressed to her scarred cheek where he'd kissed her, feeling the warmth of it, the truth of it. Victoria Ashford's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Well, she said, gathering her skirts. We'll see how long this particular charity case holds his interest. Come, ladies. We have actual shopping to do. But as she swept past Rebecca, she hissed low enough that only the seamstress could hear, enjoy it while it lasts, Rebecca. Men like Isaac Thornwood don't stay with creatures like you. He's playing some kind of game, and when he's done, you'll be exactly where you are now. Alone. Scarred. Nothing. Then she was gone, leaving Rebecca standing in the center of the shop, wondering if Victoria was right. But at 7 o'clock that evening, there was a knock on her door. Isaac Thornwood stood there, cleaned up in a way she'd never seen. He'd trimmed his beard, tied back his hair with a proper leather cord, and wore a suit, rough-hewn and clearly uncomfortable on his massive frame, but a suit nonetheless. Miss Hartwell, he said, offering his arm. You look beautiful. She'd worn her best dress, a dark blue wool that covered her from neck to wrist to ankle. She tried to arrange her hair to hide the worst of the scarring, but there was only so much she could do. Mr. Thornwood, she said softly. You don't have to. Yes, he interrupted gently. I do. The walk to the Grand Hotel took 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. Every person they passed stopped and stared. Some whispered. Some pointed. Children tugged on their mothers' skirts and asked questions that earned them sharp reprimands. Isaac ignored them all. He kept his arm steady, his pace measured, his attention focused on Rebecca. When they entered the hotel dining room, the maitre d' hesitated for just a fraction of a second, long enough to betray his discomfort with Rebecca's presence, before Isaac's expression made it clear that any objection would be a mistake he'd regret. They were seated at a corner table, away from the windows but with a view of the entire room. Isaac ordered wine, expensive, French, and a meal that included steak, roasted vegetables, and a dessert Rebecca couldn't even pronounce. You said you had a business proposition, Rebecca ventured once the wine was poured. I did, Isaac said, leaning back in his chair. The wood creaked under his weight. I need a partner. A partner? For my trading business. I trap furs, tan hides, sell to merchants as far as Seattle. It's profitable, but I'm tired of dealing with middlemen who undercut quality to increase profits. I want to sell direct. That means I need someone who can create finished goods, coats, gloves, boots, items people want to buy, made with craftsmanship that justifies a premium price. He paused, took a sip of wine. I've seen your work, Rebecca. Not just the coat you made me, but everything you've mended, altered, created. You don't just sew. You understand how garments move, how they need to fit, how to balance function with beauty. That's rare. That's valuable. Rebecca's heart was pounding. You want me to make clothes for you to sell? I want us to build something together, Isaac corrected. A shop. Your designs, my materials, our shared reputation. We split profits 60-40. 60 for you? Rebecca asked. Isaac smiled, a rare thing, and it transformed his face. 60 for you. You're doing the skilled labor. I'm just providing the raw materials. Rebecca couldn't breathe. It was too much. Too generous. Too good to be true. Why? She whispered. Why me? Isaac set down his wine glass. He leaned forward, and his pale gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place. Because 5 years ago, you ran into a burning building 3 times to save children you didn't know, he said quietly. Because you carry scars from saving lives, and you wear them with more dignity than most people wear their finest clothes. Because every piece of work you create is perfect, even though no one acknowledges it. Because you're the strongest person in this entire territory, and you don't even know it. He reached across the table and took her hand. His was huge, calloused, scarred in its own way. And because when I look at you, I don't see scars, he said. I see courage made flesh. I see beauty that goes bone deep. I see a woman I'd be honored to stand beside. Rebecca's tears fell then, splashing onto the white tablecloth. I'm not what you think I am, she choked out. I'm broken. You're perfect, Isaac said simply. And I hope you'll let me prove it to you. They talked for hours. About business, yes, but also about life. About Isaac's years in the mountains, his loneliness, his weariness with living in isolation. About Rebecca's lost teaching career, her secret love of books, her dream of one day having a shop of her own where she could create without hiding. By the time they left the hotel, it was past midnight, and Rebecca's face hurt from smiling, even the scarred side, which sometimes ached when she used those muscles. Isaac walked her home, and at her door, he said, Tomorrow, I'd like to show you something. A property on Main Street. It's been vacant for a year, but it has good light, good space. Good bones. I think it would make an excellent shop. Isaac, Rebecca said, and using his first name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. This is all happening so fast. It is, he agreed. Too fast. She thought about Victoria's warning. About games and charity cases. About the possibility that this was all some cruel joke she didn't understand yet. Then she looked at his face, at the sincerity in those pale gray eyes, and she made a choice. No, she said. Not too fast. Just right. He kissed her forehead, her scarred forehead, and bid her good night. Rebecca barely slept. She kept expecting to wake up and find it all had been a dream. But morning came, and with it, Isaac, leading her down Main Street to a 2-story building with large windows and a "For Sale" sign out front. It's owned by Obadiah Crenshaw, Isaac explained. The mayor. He's been trying to sell it for months, but the price is too high for most businesses. Mayor Crenshaw was already there when they arrived, a portly man with matonchop whiskers and shrewd pig-like eyes that calculated profit in every glance. Thornwood, he boomed. Heard you were coming. Interested in commercial property now, are we? Looking to settle down. Looking to buy this building, Isaac said bluntly. What's your price? Crenshaw named a figure that made Rebecca gasp. It was astronomical. Isaac didn't even blink. I'll give you cash. Today. But I want the deed transferred to Miss Hartwell's name. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. He looked at Rebecca, taking in her scars, her plain dress, her scarred hands. Miss Hartwell, he said slowly. The seamstress. The businesswoman, Isaac corrected. Now, see here, Thornwood. I'm not sure selling prime Main Street property to someone of Miss Hartwell's condition is appropriate for her condition. Isaac's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. What condition would that be, Obadiah? Crenshaw backpedaled. I simply mean that she's unmarried, inexperienced in business matters, and her appearance might not be conducive to attracting the sort of clientele that trusts quality over appearance. Isaac interrupted. The sort that values craftsmanship over gossip. Those are exactly the customers Rebecca will attract. Now, do you want to sell this building, or do I take my money to the property across the street? There was no property across the street, but Crenshaw didn't know that. Cash, you said? Cash. Crenshaw's greed won. Done. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. 3 days later, Rebecca Hartwell owned a building on Main Street. The transformation began immediately. Isaac brought in carpenters to build shelving, display cases, a large cutting table. Rebecca hung curtains, beautiful ones she sewed herself, and arranged her supplies with the care of an artist preparing a gallery. Word spread through Silver Ridge like wildfire. The mountain man and the scarred seamstress were opening a shop. Victoria Ashford was not pleased. She held a meeting in her parlor, a war council, really, with Eleanor and Sarah and several other women who saw Rebecca's rise as a personal affront to the natural order of things. This cannot stand, Victoria said, pacing her imported carpet. That creature cannot be allowed to establish herself on Main Street. It's unseemly. It's wrong. What can we do? Eleanor asked. If Crenshaw sold her the building. Crenshaw is a businessman, Victoria said, her mind working. And more importantly, he's a man who understands propriety. Rebecca Hartwell is unmarried. She's living alone. She's clearly being kept by Isaac Thornwood in some sordid arrangement. If we can make the town see that, if we can make her toxic to business, she'll be forced to close, Sarah finished. Or better yet, leave town entirely. Exactly, Victoria smiled. And when Thornwood realizes she's more trouble than she's worth, he'll come back to seeking appropriate companionship. The campaign began subtly. Whispered conversations. Raised eyebrows. Questions about propriety and morality. The church ladies were particularly effective, expressing concerns about young, impressionable girls being exposed to a woman who was clearly living in sin. Rebecca felt it. Customers who'd initially seemed interested suddenly didn't return. Women who'd praised her work to her face warned their daughters away behind her back. But Isaac saw it too. And Isaac Thornwood was not a man who tolerated injustice quietly. On Sunday morning, he attended church for the first time in 5 years. He sat in the back pew, his massive frame making the entire row look like doll furniture, and he listened to Reverend Patterson's sermon about maintaining moral standards in our community. When the sermon ended and the Reverend asked if anyone had anything to share, Isaac stood. The church went silent. I have something to say, Isaac rumbled, his voice carrying to every corner of the building. There's been talk in this town. Ugly talk. About Miss Rebecca Hartwell and our business arrangement. So let me make something very clear. He walked down the center aisle. Every eye followed him. Rebecca Hartwell is the finest person I've ever met. She's honest, talented, kind, and braver than any man in this room. I'm in business with her because she's exceptional at what she does. And yes, I care about her. I care about her deeply. But our relationship is honorable, our business is legitimate, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. He turned to face the congregation. Now, I know some of you have been spreading rumors. Discouraging your wives and daughters from patronizing her shop. That's your right, I suppose. But understand this, I will remember who stood by Rebecca and who stood against her. And when winter comes, when you need quality goods to survive the cold, you'll discover that I have a long memory and a short patience for cruelty. It wasn't a threat, exactly. But it wasn't not a threat. Reverend Patterson cleared his throat. Mr. Thornwood, I appreciate your passion. But this is a house of God, and then perhaps God might appreciate knowing that Rebecca Hartwell saved 14 children from burning alive while most of this congregation slept soundly in their beds, Isaac interrupted. Perhaps God already knows who the true Christians are in this room. I'm guessing he's disappointed in most of you. With that, Isaac walked out, leaving a church full of deeply uncomfortable people behind him. The tide turned. Not immediately, but gradually. A few brave souls ventured into Rebecca's shop and discovered that her work was indeed exceptional. They told their friends. Those friends told others. Within a month, Rebecca had more commissions than she could handle. But Mayor Crenshaw was not done. He appeared at the shop one afternoon when Rebecca was working alone. Isaac had gone to Seattle to meet with merchants, and wouldn't return for a week. Miss Hartwell, Crenshaw said, his smile not reaching his eyes. How is business? Very well, Mayor, Rebecca said carefully. Is there something I can help you with? In fact, there is. He produced a document from his coat pocket. I've been reviewing town ordinances, and I've discovered something concerning. It appears that your shop may not be in compliance with certain health and safety regulations. Rebecca's stomach dropped. What regulations? Well, for one, businesses that serve the public must be operated by individuals who meet certain standards of presentation. It's a matter of public confidence, you understand. And given your disfigurement, I'm not certain you meet those standards. That's not a real ordinance, Rebecca said, her voice shaking but firm. You're making that up. Crenshaw's smile widened. Am I? I'm the mayor, Miss Hartwell. I interpret the ordinances. And I'm concerned that your presence on Main Street may be detrimental to Silver Ridge's reputation. People talk, you know. They say we're the town that lets monsters run businesses. Rebecca felt the old shame rising, the familiar burn of humiliation. But then she thought of Isaac's words in the church. She thought of the children she'd saved. She thought of every perfect stitch she'd ever sewn. Get out, she said quietly. Excuse me. Get out of my shop, Mayor Crenshaw. This building is legally mine. My business is legitimate. And you have no authority here. Crenshaw's face reddened. You're making a mistake, girl. I can make your life very difficult. I can ensure that no one in this town will do business with you. I can. You can leave, Rebecca said, her voice stronger now. Before I file a formal complaint about harassment. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed to slits. Fine. But mark my words, Miss Hartwell. This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me. He stormed out, leaving Rebecca shaking but victorious. She was still shaking when Isaac returned a week later, carrying samples of fabrics and trim from Seattle. He took one look at her face and knew something had happened. She told him about Crenshaw's visit. About the threats. About the fake ordinances. Isaac's expression darkened to something Rebecca had never seen before. Cold. Dangerous. The face of a man who'd killed grizzly bears with his bare hands. That ends now, he said simply. The next morning, Isaac paid a visit to Mayor Crenshaw's office. No one knows exactly what was said in that meeting, but witnesses reported that Isaac went in looking like a thunderstorm, and Crenshaw came out looking pale and shaken. After that, the mayor stopped bothering Rebecca. In fact, he stopped bothering anyone who did business with her. But Victoria Ashford was not so easily deterred. On a Friday evening in early December, as the first real snow of winter began to fall, Rebecca was working late in her shop, finishing a commissioned coat for a rancher's wife. She was alone. The town was quiet, most people already home for supper. She didn't hear the back door open. Didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. Victoria stood in the doorway, and she wasn't alone. With her were two men Rebecca didn't recognize, rough-looking characters with the air of hired muscle about them. "Working late, I see," Victoria said, her voice sugar-sweet and poison-bitter. "How industrious." Rebecca stood, reaching for the scissors on her cutting table. "Not as a weapon, just for comfort." "Mrs. Ashford. I'm closed for the evening." "Oh, I'm not here to shop." Victoria stepped inside, the two men flanking her like guard dogs. "I'm here to deliver a message." "What message?" "That you're not wanted here. That you never were. That your little fairy tale with Isaac Thornwood is about to end very badly for you." Rebecca's heart was pounding. "I think you should leave." "Or what?" Victoria laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You'll ask your mountain man to save you?" "He's not here, Rebecca. He's gone to his claim for the winter supply run. Won't be back for days. And by then, you'll be gone." "Gone. These gentlemen are from the Territorial Asylum," Victoria lied smoothly. "We've filed a petition claiming that you're mentally unsound. That your delusions about being a businesswoman, about Isaac Thornwood caring for you, are evidence of a disturbed mind. That you're a danger to yourself and others." It was all lies. None of it was legal. But Victoria was betting that Rebecca wouldn't know that fear and shame would make her compliant. Rebecca looked at the two men. They were moving closer, their intentions clear. "I'm not going anywhere," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm afraid you don't have a choice," Victoria said. "Take her." The men lunged forward. Rebecca grabbed the scissors and swung them wildly, not trying to stab but to create distance. One of the men caught her wrist, twisted it until the scissors clattered to the floor. "No!" Rebecca screamed, struggling. "Help! Someone help!" But the street was empty. The snow-muffled sound. No one heard. The men were dragging her toward the back door when Rebecca's hand fell on something on the worktable. The pressing iron. Still hot from where she'd been working. She grabbed it by its wooden handle and swung it with all her strength. The iron connected with the first man's shoulder. He screamed, releasing her, the smell of singed fabric and burning flesh filling the air. The second man hesitated, just for a moment. That moment was enough. Rebecca swung again, this time at his head. He ducked, but the iron caught his raised arm. He howled, stumbling back. Victoria's face had gone white. "You crazy bitch. You'll pay for this. Get out." Rebecca screamed, brandishing the iron. "Get out of my shop." The two men were already running, cradling their burned limbs. Victoria backed toward the door, her expression promising retribution. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Isaac Thornwood will see you for what you really are. A violent, scarred monster. And when he does, you'll have nothing. Nothing." She fled into the night. Rebecca stood alone in her shop, the iron still clutched in her shaking hands, tears streaming down both sides of her face, the scarred and the whole. She'd defended herself. She'd fought back. She'd won. But Victoria's words echoed, "This isn't over." And Rebecca knew she was right. The battle had been won. The war was just beginning. Isaac returned 2 days later, and when he saw the bruises on Rebecca's wrists, heard what had happened, his face became a mask of cold fury. "She sent men to abduct you," he said, his voice deadly quiet. She could have killed you. But she didn't, Rebecca said. I stopped them. With a pressing iron, Isaac said, and despite the situation, there was something like pride in his voice. You magnificent, terrifying woman. He pulled her into his arms, carefully, mindful of her bruises. This ends, he said into her hair. I'm ending it. How? By making sure Victoria Ashford can never touch you again. By making sure everyone in this territory knows that you're under my protection. By making sure that anyone who threatens you answers to me. He pulled back, looked into her eyes, the scarred and the whole. Rebecca Hartwell, will you marry me? Rebecca stared at him. What? I'm asking you to be my wife. Not for protection, though that's part of it. Not for business, though we make excellent partners. I'm asking because I love you. I love your strength. I love your talent. I love the way you survived fire and came out the other side still capable of kindness. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. He knelt. There, in her shop, surrounded by fabric and thread and the tools of her trade, Isaac Thornwood knelt before Rebecca Hartwell. I don't have a ring yet, he said. But I promise you this, I will honor you. I will protect you. I will stand beside you against anyone who tries to hurt you. And I will spend every day making sure you know how precious you are. Rebecca couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Could only nod, tears flowing freely. Yes? Isaac asked. Yes, Rebecca whispered. Then louder, yes. Yes, Isaac. Yes. He stood and kissed her. Not on her scarred cheek this time, but on her lips, deep and long and full of promise. They were married a week later by Reverend Patterson, in a ceremony attended by half the town, the half that mattered. The half that had learned to see beauty where Victoria Ashford saw only scars. Victoria herself didn't attend. But she watched from her window as Rebecca walked down Main Street in a wedding dress she'd sewn herself, white silk and lace that somehow made her scars look like war medals, badges of honor rather than marks of shame. And Victoria Ashford finally understood that she'd lost. Not just Isaac Thornwood. Not just the battle for social supremacy. She'd lost the war for relevance in a town that was learning to value substance over surface. Isaac and Rebecca moved into the apartment above the shop. They ran the business together, his furs, her designs, their combined reputation for quality and integrity. The shop thrived. Within a year, they had customers from 3 territories. Within 2, they were shipping goods as far as San Francisco and Chicago. Rebecca's designs became famous for their blend of function and beauty, their durability and artistry. People didn't just buy clothes from Thornwood and Hartwell. They bought wearable art. And every piece, if you looked carefully, bore Rebecca's secret signature, a tiny embroidered star, hidden in a seam or hem, marking it as genuine. 5 years after they married, Isaac and Rebecca sat on the porch of the home they'd built on the outskirts of town, a proper house with a proper workshop where Rebecca could create and Isaac could tan his hides. Rebecca was expecting their first child. The pregnancy had been easy, and she glowed with health and happiness. Remember when Victoria called me a monster? Rebecca asked, one hand on her swelling belly. Isaac was silent for a moment. Then, she was right. Rebecca looked at him sharply. He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that still made her heart skip. You are a monster, he said. You're the kind of monster that runs into burning buildings to save children. The kind of monster that builds businesses and creates beauty and fights off kidnappers with pressing irons. The kind of monster that makes ordinary people look like cowards by comparison. He took her scarred hand in his scarred hand. And I'm the luckiest man alive to have a monster like you love me back." Rebecca laughed, and the sound was pure joy. In the distance, they could see the lights of Silver Ridge coming on as dusk fell. In one of those windows, Victoria Ashford sat alone in her empty mansion, beautiful and bitter and forgotten. But Rebecca Hartwell Thornwood didn't spare her a thought. She was too busy planning her daughter's nursery, designing a new line of children's clothes, and holding the hand of the man who'd looked past her scars and seen her soul. And that, dear friends, is the legend of Rebecca and Isaac. In a world that valued perfect faces and pristine histories, they chose to build something on the foundation of scars, strength, and unshakable love. Rebecca proved that beauty isn't diminished by fire, it's revealed by it. Isaac proved that the strongest men aren't afraid to kneel before the women who deserve their devotion. Together, they proved that the most powerful weapon against cruelty isn't revenge, it's success. If you enjoyed this story of courage, craft, and choosing love over appearance, please hit that like button. It helps this channel grow and allows us to share more tales of the human spirit tested and proven. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from Western Souls. And tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone choose substance over surface? What happened? Where frontier justice meets the human heart.